Okay, let's get stuck in. We're going to talk today about some important terminology. So what important terminology? Specifically, we'll talk about what innovation is, what disruption and disruptive innovation are. These are going to be important because we'll talk about them in the context of what we're doing today, but they'll be important concepts as we move forward next week when we start talking about artificial intelligence and the way that it's used as well. And that will basically give us an opportunity to thinking about what innovation and disruption are to move ourselves into talking about the history of technology. So, may as well see my face as we do this. Let's basically get ourselves started. So, we're going to take a look at the word innovation. Now, innovation, we tend to think about that as meaning something new, and clearly it does. And when we talk about innovation, rather unhelpfully, a dictionary will talk about it as the process of innovating. But what I want you to do is think about innovation not so much as the process of innovating, I will get there eventually, but as this idea of a new method, idea, or product. And so innovation, while we often think of an innovation as being totally new, often innovation is really about doing something in a new way, often using old technologies or old ways of doing things, or doing something that we've done before using new technology or new for this task or experience type technology. And so, in the innovation community, we often kind of joke that there's no such thing as anything new, that what we are doing is adapting and changing processes to address new opportunities, changes in technologies, increases in speed or veracity of data, those kinds of things. So when we're talking about innovation, let's make sure that we're clear. Even though we're talking about a new way of doing something, it's not necessarily a new thing that we're doing or actually brand new technologies. So keep that in mind. It's also worth remembering that innovation is not just about technology. Innovation itself is often a process. So Joseph Schumpeter, way back in 1942, conceptualized the idea of innovation as basically being a continuous process of improving, a transformative process, so that provides for economic development, which results from entrepreneurs employing new combinations of resources to create new products, new production processes, new markets, new sources of supply, and new organizational structures. Notice that the word technology isn't used there at all. In its broader sense, we can think about innovation as being, again, new ways of doing things, including the way we organize and structure ourselves. So keep that in mind when you think about what innovations are as you progress through this subject. The other thing that's really important is we're often going to talk about disruptive innovations, which means we need to understand what disruption itself is. Now, this is super important because those of you who've been in high school will think of disruption, like I did when I first saw it, as disruption means noisy, interruptive. You know, those disruptive kids in the back of the class? Not us propeller heads. Clearly, I was a girly swat, to say the least. But anyway, enough about me for now. So disruption here, when we use it in the context of innovation, has a technical meaning. It's based on the work of Clayton Christensen. He's a Harvard professor, and he's been studying why and how certain initially inferior technologies or ways of doing things, how they basically disrupt standard markets or well-developed, well-understood, mature markets over time. So basically, if we look at the blue lines, what we're looking at is the way that a market performs over time. And what's really important here is this idea of, let me bring up the pen, thought I had it ready to go, this idea of product performance here. Let me get the right pen now. So basically over time here, we expect technology to evolve, so starting with lower performance and improving over time. The blue lines here essentially show what is happening in a particular market. Over time, we expect lower performance to continue to increase, but not at the same rate as high ends of the market improving. And then we've got basically middle line users here. So basically, over time, if you are a high-end producer in a particular market, so if the work or the product or service that you provide is at the high end, so let's think about the one you will have all heard about, Kodak. So Kodak was a high-end producer of film. Film for cameras, film for professional use. So Kodak's product at its best was at this high end, and it had absolute market leadership. So in the late 90s, it had more employees than it had ever had before. It had a higher share price than it ever had before. It was the preeminent product. And so then when this little thing came along, the so-called digital camera, at the beginning, as it entered into the market, its performance was well and truly substandard to mainstream performance at that time. Absolutely substandard. There was no way that anybody was going to get their wedding photos taken on a 2 megapixel digital camera. Those of you who might have had parents who were early adopters, or maybe you were an early adopter yourself back in the 90s, you go back and look at that film now and you think, those digital, and you think, oh my goodness, why didn't I just take photographs of my baby the normal way with a camera and be scanning them now? Can you tell? I landed in that position with my second child. I have really no usable photographs of him later on. Anyway, again, enough about me. Basically, it's very difficult for the incumbent that's basically continuing to develop and put R&D into its high-end product to really worry terribly much about the disruptive entity at this part of the market. So this is why we call it the incumbent sustaining trajectory. It's trying to sustain its market share by being able to provide the absolute best product it can. But as an entrant comes in, a new entrant, initially it's not doing enough, even for the low end of the market, but it approaches the mainstream user very early, well, not necessarily very early on, at some point, at which point usually a lower cost offering is well and truly good enough for the mainstream user. Okay, so you can read more. There's plenty of materials about Clayton Christensen and disruptive technology. And in the additional readings that you'll find on the Canvas, you can find a lot more about this theory if you are interested. Okay, so on the screen there you can see a Blackberry. Blackberries were really, really popular technology before smartphones, when basically mobile phones were primarily used for voice calls and for text messaging. Smartphones introduced a variety of new features, for example, internet connectivity, touchscreen, cameras, the ability to run a third-party app, the ability to play a game, all of those kind of things. And these created a whole new market for this device that we didn't have before, something that was not just a mobile phone and not quite a computer either. And the innovation itself basically changed the way that people started to think about the devices they carry with them. Of course, today a smartphone is effectively, they're ubiquitous. There are billions of users worldwide, and they've disrupted a range of industry, ranging from photography, again, when I was talking about Kodak a minute ago, those first digital cameras, yeah, they're expensive, they're not as good a quality. But when we could put a good quality digital camera in your phone, the device that you're carrying with you anywhere, everywhere, anyway, that completely changed the way that people thought about recording their memories. So, the rise of smartphones also led to the development of a range of related technologies. For example, mobile payment systems, um, app stores, mobile advertising. So, there's a whole lot of things that were fueling that mobile or smartphone ecosystem. So, Blackberry was once the dominant player in the enterprise mobile phone market. So, in other words, if you had a work phone, it was likely to be a Blackberry. People liked, or organizations liked, Blackberries because they had a full keyboard. You weren't having to just use your thumb to type over the numbers. You could actually, well, still thumbs, but you could use both of them and end up with something akin to what your keyboard was. They also had high levels of security. You could get your emails on the go, and they were really seen as a business machine. But the company that made the BlackBerry failed to recognize the potential for touchscreen devices, saw them really as toys, as consumer goods rather than enterprise goods. And they also didn't really see how things like games and cameras were going to be used by business people, basically because they forgot that business people are just people. So its focus on enterprise customers really proved to be a liability for them in the long run. As the market shifted towards consumer-oriented devices, BlackBerry's devices were seen less user-friendly and less capable than competitors like the iPhone or the Android-based smartphones, which offered larger screens, better cameras, and a wider range of apps and services. So, as a result, BlackBerry's share declined sharply from 2010 onwards. It struggled to keep up with the pace of innovation, and attempts to introduce new devices and software platforms were really unsuccessful. So, by 2016, BlackBerry stopped manufacturing its own devices and shifted its focus towards enterprise software and services altogether. It's a really good example of how disruptive innovation, the smartphone, the thing that wasn't as good at security, wasn't as good at email, any of those things to start off with, can really upend established markets and the incumbents. Because BlackBerry failed to recognize the potential of the new technologies and the business models that underpinned them, it lost its competitive edge and ultimately fell behind its more innovative competitors. Why tell you this story? I just want to highlight the importance of keeping pace with market trends and investing in R&D to remain competitive in a rapidly changing landscape. Something that is much easier to say than it may well be to do. Okay, the next really important concept that we're going to talk about is this idea of Industry 4, sometimes Industry 4.0, or even the fourth industrial revolution. We'll talk a little bit more about industrial revolutions when I take you through the briefest history of tech in a future video. But I think it's really important for us to make sure that we have this understanding of what the fourth industrial revolution is, because it will impact all of the future content. So where the original industrial revolution was propelled by steam, and the second industrial revolution, the space age, was powered by electricity, automation and machinery, very preliminary automation and machinery, engineered what we call the third industrial evolution. It's actually cyber physical systems or intelligent computers that are shaping the fourth industrial revolution. So before 2014, if you did a Google search for Industry 4, you probably wouldn't find anything very much at all. But these days, we're hearing that 4IR or Fourth Industrial Revolution all the time. McKinsey, who provided the diagram that's on the slide over there, basically did a survey in 2019, and when they found that, this is pre-COVID of course, that 68% of respondents regarded Industry 4.0 as a top strategic priority, and 70% said that their companies were already piloting or deploying new technology. So what is it? The Fourth Industrial Revolution builds on the inventions that were made during the Third Industrial Revolution or the Digital Revolution. And it brings these inventions beyond the previous realm of possibility with 4 foundational types of disruptive technology. So the first is connectivity, data, and computational power. Cloud technology, the internet, and blockchain, sensors, all of these things we'll be talking about this week as we explore the Internet of Things and big data. Analytics and intelligence. So advanced analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. So a little bit this week as we talk about big data and big data analytics, and then we'll move from next week onwards as we explore machine learning and artificial intelligence in more detail. Thirdly, human-machine interaction. Not covered so much in this course, but I think you know what it is. We're talking virtual reality, we're talking augmented reality, robotics and automation, a little bit in the Internet of Things, and a little bit in AI, I guess, and autonomous guided vehicles. And we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about autonomous guided vehicles or self-driving vehicles in a couple of weeks' time. And then the fourth is advanced engineering, so additive manufacturing, so things like 3D printing, renewable energy, nanoparticles, etc. So it is worth, when we're thinking about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, to remind ourselves that technology is only half of the equation. To really survive, to thrive even in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, companies are going to need to ensure that their workers are properly equipped through upskilling and reskilling, and they're going to need to change the nature of the jobs that people do. That is one of the reasons, I assume, that smart cookies like you have decided to do an elective like this one. So let's make sure that we understand what Industrial Revolution is, the Fourth Industrial Revolution is, because it's going to be important for all of the content in this course.